I never imagined that catching my sister with my boyfriend would be the least shocking thing to happen that week. Not until I uncovered the family secret that explained everything. You know how every family has that one person who just seems to glide through life while everyone else struggles? That was my sister Sophia. While I worked double shifts just to keep my head above water, she somehow always landed on her feet. I'm Maya, by the way, and I'd finally found something good. David, a man who saw past my exhaustion to the dreams I'd buried under responsibilities. The morning I decided to surprise Sophia with coffee before her wedding rehearsal, I was actually feeling grateful. Grateful that after 35 years of being the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who fixed everyone else's problems, I finally had someone who wanted to take care of me for a change. But when I walked into that hotel room and saw them together, something felt wrong. This wasn't passion, it was desperation. Sophia was crying, clinging to David like he was her lifeline, whispering words I couldn't quite catch. And suddenly, all those little things that never made sense about my family started clicking into place, leading me toward a truth that would shatter everything. That moment of seeing them together should have been my breaking point, but honestly, part of me wasn't even surprised. Growing up, Sophia had this way of taking whatever she wanted, and somehow everyone just let her. Our mom always said Sophia needed more help because life had been harder on her. Different fathers, you know. While my dad stuck around and taught me that everything worthwhile required work, Sophia's dad disappeared when she was 3, leaving Mom feeling guilty enough to overcompensate for the next 25 years. "She's more sensitive," Mom would say whenever I questioned why Sophia got the car while I took the bus, or why her college tuition came from savings while mine came from loans and late-night shifts at the campus bookstore. David was the first person who ever called it what it was. Not in a cruel way, he's not like that, but with the kind of gentle honesty that made me realize how twisted normal had become in my family. When he'd watch Sophia forget her wallet at dinner for the 4th time in a month, he'd squeeze my hand under the table and later ask why I always picked up the check. Not judging, just noticing, seeing patterns that I'd trained myself to ignore. The wedding itself had been another red flag that I'd pushed down. $80,000 for someone whose Instagram posts about living my best life never quite matched her supposed income as a lifestyle influencer. But questioning Sophia's finances was like questioning gravity in our family, something you just didn't do. David had started noticing things about my family that took me years to see clearly, like how every major holiday somehow became about managing Sophia's latest crisis, the unpaid rent that threatened to ruin Christmas, the maxed-out credit cards that cast a shadow over Easter dinner, the mysterious temporary financial emergencies that happened with clockwork regularity. When Mom would slip Sophia cash while thinking no one was looking, David would catch my eye across the kitchen, not in a mean way, but with that quiet concern that made my chest tight. Later, lying in bed, he'd ask gentle questions that made me realize how many family gatherings ended with me driving home feeling drained and somehow guilty for having my life together. The patterns went back decades. While other families had normal sibling rivalry, ours had something more complicated. Sophia got the bedroom with the attached bathroom. Mine faced the alley. She received a car for her 16th birthday. Mine was earned through babysitting and weekend jobs. College applications meant scholarships and student loans for me, while Mom somehow found money in the budget for Sophia's tuition at a private school that cost twice as much. "She needs more support because she's artistic," Mom would explain whenever Dad, bless his heart, tried to point out the inequality. "Maya's always been self-sufficient. She's stronger." Being called strong felt like a compliment until you realized it meant you'd never get help, even when you desperately needed it. Sophia had mastered the art of making her problems sound urgent while mine seemed manageable. When my car broke down junior year, causing me to miss work and risk my job, the family response was practical advice about public transportation. When Sophia's laptop died during her senior year, suddenly there was emergency money for a replacement that cost more than my monthly rent. Family dinners became exercises in careful navigation. Topics that might reveal the financial disparities were avoided. Questions about Sophia's work were deflected with vague answers about building her brand and networking opportunities. Meanwhile, my promotion at the marketing firm got a polite, "That's nice, dear," before conversation shifted to Sophia's latest social media milestone. David witnessed his first full family gathering last Thanksgiving, watching as Sophia arrived empty-handed while everyone else contributed dishes, listening as she dominated conversation with complaints about how hard it was to find good lighting for her content. Later, loading dishes into Mom's dishwasher, he quietly asked if it was always like this. The fact that someone finally noticed made me want to cry and scream at the same time. By Christmas, he'd started pointing out patterns with the gentle persistence of someone who loved me enough to risk making me uncomfortable. How Sophia always had emergencies right before major purchases were discussed. How family financial conversations stopped whenever she entered the room. How Mom's expression changed, become guarded, almost protective, whenever money came up around her younger daughter. The wedding week arrived with its usual chaos of last-minute vendor calls and family obligations that somehow all fell to me. Mom had asked if David and I could handle the coffee run to keep the bridal party energized during their final dress fitting, and honestly, it felt nice to be helpful without it feeling like an emergency rescue mission. Walking into that hotel suite with 2 carriers of artisanal lattes, expecting to find typical pre-wedding jitters and maybe some champagne-fueled bonding, everything shifted in the space of a heartbeat. The scene before me made no sense. David backed against the window, hands raised defensively, while Sophia pressed against him with an intensity that looked more like drowning than desire. Her voice cut through the stunned silence, high and desperate. "Please, you have to help me understand the requirements. There has to be a way around it." The words tumbled out between sobs, nothing like the confident sister who'd spent months posting countdown photos and wedding hashtags. David's face showed pure confusion mixed with something close to professional concern. This wasn't the expression of a man caught in passion. This was someone trying to process an impossible situation while maintaining boundaries that clearly weren't being respected. The coffee carriers slipped from my hands, hitting the carpet with that particular sound of expensive mistakes, and both of them spun toward me with expressions that revealed everything and nothing at once. Sophia's face crumpled the moment she saw me, not with guilt, but with the kind of devastation reserved for someone whose last hope had just evaporated. "Maya, this isn't what it looks like," she whispered, mascara streaming down her cheeks in dark rivers that told a story of hours, not minutes, of crying. David stepped forward immediately, his professional composure intact despite the chaos. "She came to me for financial advice about some legal documents," he said, his voice carrying that careful tone he used with distressed clients. "She's been trying to understand inheritance requirements, and things got overwhelming." The word inheritance hit like a physical blow, connecting to whispered phone conversations between Mom and Sophia that always stopped when anyone else entered the room. Suddenly, Sophia's desperate interest in David's profession over the past few months made a different kind of sense. Not romantic attraction, but something far more calculating. What inheritance? The question came out sharper than intended, but Sophia's reaction confirmed my growing suspicion. She flinched as if struck, then began backing toward the door with the frantic energy of someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing. "You wouldn't understand," she said, reaching for her usual deflection tactics. "You've always been good with money. You don't know what it's like to be desperate." But her voice lacked its typical conviction, replaced by something raw and terrified that made my stomach clench with the certainty that this wedding, this family gathering, everything we thought we knew was built on lies. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken questions and the growing realization that catching them together was just the beginning of discoveries I wasn't prepared to face. After Sophia fled the room, David and I sat in his car for what felt like hours while he explained everything. 3 weeks earlier, she'd shown up at his office unannounced, claiming she needed professional consultation about her financial situation. What he discovered made his trained eye widen with concern. Credit cards maxed at their limits, personal loans from predatory lenders, and a lifestyle completely disconnected from any verifiable income. The numbers were staggering, he said. $43,000 in high-interest debt with minimum payments she couldn't make. Her influencer income had dried up months ago when brands started requiring actual engagement metrics instead of follower counts. The wedding expenses alone, venue deposits, dress alterations, catering upgrades, were being funded entirely through cash advances that carried interest rates approaching loan shark territory. But the most disturbing part wasn't the debt itself. During their consultations, Sophia kept steering conversations toward inheritance law, asking specific questions about trust fund requirements and legal loopholes. She'd mentioned a family inheritance with very particular conditions and pressed David for ways someone might technically satisfy requirements they couldn't naturally meet. "That's when she started getting inappropriate," David continued, his discomfort obvious. "She'd find excuses to touch my arm, make comments about how lucky you were to have someone so knowledgeable about finance. Yesterday, she flat out asked if I'd be willing to bend some rules for family." The professional boundary violations escalated until today's desperate attempt to seduce information out of him. Her questions revealed a sophisticated understanding of legal terminology that seemed far beyond casual curiosity. She knew about beneficiary requirements, marriage stipulations, and professional qualification clauses with the precision of someone who'd studied every word of a particular document. When David refused to provide the specific advice she wanted, her composure finally cracked. She kept saying, "You don't understand. This is my only chance," he recalled. She wasn't talking about the wedding. She was talking about something that could solve all her financial problems at once, something that required marrying someone in finance, and apparently her fiancé doesn't qualify. The pieces were forming a picture that made my heart race with dread and recognition. Armed with David's revelations, my mind raced back to every strange conversation and secretive moment from the past year. The inheritance Sophia mentioned wasn't some vague family legend. It was real, documented, and apparently worth destroying relationships over. That evening, while helping Mom organize wedding favors at her house, opportunity presented itself when she stepped outside to take a call from the florist. Her purse sat open on the kitchen counter, and there, nestled between grocery receipts and prescription bottles, was a thick manila envelope marked Rodriguez Family Trust, legal documents. My hands trembled as I pulled out the papers, recognizing the letterhead of Denver's most prestigious estate law firm. The will of my late grandmother, Elena Rodriguez Sr., contained provisions that made my blood run cold. The document was dated just 2 years before Grandma's death, when she was still sharp and decisive. Page after page detailed the distribution of her considerable estate, the house in Cherry Creek, investment accounts, and what appeared to be substantial life insurance proceeds. But buried in the legal language was a clause that explained everything. To the first granddaughter who enters into marriage with a man employed in the financial services industry and who has demonstrated fiscal responsibility through documented personal savings of no less than $10,000. Grandma had been old-fashioned about financial security, often lecturing us about the importance of marrying men who could provide stability. What seemed like outdated relationship advice now revealed itself as a carefully crafted legal requirement worth nearly $300,000. The timing requirement was equally specific. The marriage had to occur before the younger granddaughter's 30th birthday, which meant Sophia had exactly 18 months before the trust would default to charity. Further documentation revealed why Sophia's desperation had reached fever pitch. James, her fiancé, wasn't the tech entrepreneur she'd claimed to everyone. Employment verification forms showed he worked as a customer service representative at a local credit union. Technically financial services, but not in the capacity Sophia had led our family to believe. Worse, bank statements tucked behind the legal papers showed she had exactly $47, nowhere near the required $10,000. The most damning evidence came in the form of email printouts between Sophia and the estate attorney. For months, she'd been trying to find loopholes in the language, questioning whether dating someone in finance counted, whether personal debt could be offset against savings requirements, whether the marriage had to be permanent or just legal at the moment of claim. The attorney's responses grew increasingly firm about the trust's ironclad conditions. But what made my stomach turn wasn't just Sophia's deception. It was the realization that she'd been positioning herself to claim an inheritance that should have been mine by birthright. The savings requirement favored someone who actually managed money responsibly, and the professional stipulation seemed tailor-made for my relationship with David. Grandma had known both her granddaughter's personalities when she crafted these conditions. Mom's voice on the porch grew louder, signaling the end of her phone call. Quickly replacing the documents, my mind raced with the implications. This wasn't just about Sophia's financial desperation. This was about a systematic deception that involved our entire family. The wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was a carefully orchestrated attempt to steal an inheritance through manipulation and lies. The front door opened, and Mom returned with the kind of guilty expression that suggested she knew exactly what I'd discovered. Mom froze when she saw the expression on my face, her hand still gripping the door handle as if escape remained possible. The color drained from her cheeks as she registered the manila envelope now sitting conspicuously on top of her purse instead of hidden beneath layers of daily life. "We need to talk," came out steadier than expected, though my heart hammered against my ribs. About Grandma's trust, about what Sophia's been planning, about how long you've known. Mom's shoulders sagged with the weight of secrets finally surfacing, and she moved to the kitchen table with the careful steps of someone navigating around broken glass. "Your grandmother loved you both," she began, voice barely above a whisper. "But she worried about Sophia's relationship with money. She thought if there were conditions, it might force her to make better choices." The words came slowly, as if each one caused physical pain. Mom's hands twisted together in patterns that betrayed years of anxiety about this moment. But what spilled out next revealed deceptions that ran far deeper than a manipulated inheritance. For the past 3 years, Mom had been systematically refinancing her house to cover Sophia's mounting debts. First, it was just until she found steady work. Then, just until her content creation took off. Then, just until she found the right partner to settle down with. Each refinancing pushed Mom closer to her own financial cliff. "She was so scared when she read the will after the funeral," Mom continued, tears starting to flow. She'd calculated how much money she owed, and the inheritance seemed like the only way out. When she started dating James, she lied about his job because she was embarrassed. But then she realized she could make it work if she could just figure out how to meet the savings requirement. The scope of the conspiracy grew clearer with each concession. When Sophia's relationship with James became serious enough for marriage, Mom had helped craft the deception about his career, even coaching him on financial terminology to use at family gatherings. They'd researched ways to artificially inflate Sophia's savings account temporarily, including borrowing money from Mom's retirement fund just before the wedding to create the appearance of fiscal responsibility. But the attorney wouldn't be fooled by quick deposits, Mom admitted, wiping her eyes with tissues that were already soggy. He required bank statements showing consistent saving patterns over at least 18 months. That's when Sophia got desperate and started thinking about David. The plan had been for Sophia to somehow transfer her relationship to David or convince him to marry her instead of me, ensuring she met the professional requirement while giving her time to establish the savings pattern. Mom's financial situation was even worse than David had suspected. Between the house refinancing, loans to cover Sophia's debts, and her own struggles with medical bills from Dad's cancer treatment 2 years ago, she was facing foreclosure within months. The inheritance represented salvation for both women, which explained why Mom had been willing to participate in increasingly elaborate deceptions. "She wasn't trying to steal from you," Mom said desperately. "She was drowning, and we thought, if she could just get stable, maybe she could help the family instead of being a burden." But her voice faltered as she spoke, recognizing how thin the justification sounded when spoken aloud. The most painful revelation came last. Mom had known about Sophia's attempts to seduce David. When those failed, they discussed staging some kind of crisis that would require David's professional intervention, hoping to create enough confusion about relationships and finances that Sophia might still have a claim. The wedding itself was partly theater, designed to make Sophia's marriage appear legitimate while buying time to figure out next steps. "Your grandmother wanted to protect both of you," Mom whispered. "But all we've done is tear this family apart. And tomorrow, Sophia's supposed to marry James, knowing it's all built on lies that are about to destroy everyone." The weight of betrayal settled over me like a blanket, suffocating and complete. Tomorrow's wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was the culmination of a desperate scheme that had corrupted every relationship in our family. Leaving Mom's house that evening, one question burned through my mind. Did James know? The thought of him standing at the altar tomorrow, unaware that his bride had built their entire relationship around a legal loophole, made my chest tight with secondhand humiliation. David agreed to help me find out, understanding that someone about to pledge his life to my sister deserved the truth, regardless of the consequences. Finding James proved easier than expected. Friday evening bachelor parties in Denver follow predictable patterns, and we located him at a sports bar downtown, nursing a beer while his groomsmen played pool. The celebration looked subdued for someone getting married in 12 hours. James sat alone at a corner table, staring at his phone with the expression of a man wrestling with doubts he couldn't quite name. "Mind if we join you?" David asked, sliding into the booth across from him. James looked up with relief, as if he'd been waiting for someone to interrupt his brooding. "Actually, I'm glad you're here," he said, gesturing to the empty seat beside him. "I've been wanting to talk to someone who knows Sophia well, really knows her." What emerged from our conversation shattered my assumptions about James's role in the deception. Far from being a willing accomplice, he'd been questioning inconsistencies in Sophia's stories for months. Her evasiveness about money, her sudden interest in his work at the credit union, her insistence on handling all their wedding finances without his input, everything had created a growing sense of unease he couldn't shake. "She told me you were struggling financially," James said, looking directly at me. "Said your family had been supporting you through rough times, and that's why David was so involved in family money discussions. But watching you two together, that never made sense." His observations revealed how thoroughly Sophia had twisted reality, painting me as the irresponsible sister while positioning herself as the stable, marriage-ready daughter. James had his own financial concerns that made Sophia's version impossible to believe. Working customer service at a credit union didn't provide the income for lavish weddings, yet Sophia insisted they could afford everything because of her successful content creation business. When he'd asked to see her business records for their joint loan applications, she'd deflected with tears and accusations that he didn't trust her artistic vision. The most troubling revelation came when James pulled out his phone and showed us text messages from the past week. Sophia had been pressuring him to lie about his job title during the wedding ceremony, claiming it would impress her family's business connections. She wanted the officiant to introduce him as a financial services executive instead of customer service representative, and had even suggested he should network with David about investment strategies during the reception. "She's been asking weird questions about inheritance law, too," James continued, scrolling through more messages. "Like whether marriage certificates are dated from the ceremony or when they're filed with the county. And she wanted to know if there are legal differences between civil ceremonies and religious ones." The questions revealed a sophisticated understanding of legal timing that had nothing to do with wedding planning and everything to do with trust fund requirements. But James's most devastating discovery had happened just 2 days ago. While helping Sophia move boxes from her apartment, he'd accidentally opened one containing bank statements and legal correspondence. The credit card debt shocked him, but the emails to estate attorneys about inheritance requirements explained everything that had felt wrong about their relationship. "She doesn't love me," he said quietly, the words carrying the weight of dreams being systematically dismantled. "She loves what marrying me might accomplish. And the worst part is, she's been so desperate about it that I started wondering if I was crazy for having doubts." The relief in his voice at finally speaking these fears aloud was heartbreaking and liberating at once. David leaned forward with the gentle authority he used in his most difficult client consultations. "What if I told you there was an inheritance worth nearly $300,000 that requires marriage to someone in financial services?" James's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, anger, and finally a terrible clarity that confirmed our worst suspicions. Then I'd say Sophia found herself a customer service representative at a credit union and convinced herself that was close enough. And I'd say this wedding tomorrow is the biggest mistake either of us could make. The decision in his voice suggested we'd given him permission to trust instincts he'd been suppressing for months. Looking across the table at this decent man who'd been as manipulated as anyone in our family, a plan began forming in my mind. Tomorrow's wedding was going to happen, but not the way anyone expected. Saturday morning arrived with the deceptive beauty of a perfect wedding day. Clear skies, gentle breeze, the kind of weather that makes people believe in fairy tale endings. But walking into the bridal suite at the downtown hotel, carrying what would be my final peace offering of coffee, everything felt different. This time, armed with the truth, each detail of Sophia's preparation revealed itself as part of an elaborate performance. Finding her alone, makeup half-finished and wedding dress hanging like a beautiful lie behind her, provided the opening both of us had been avoiding. "We need to talk," fell between us with the weight of everything unsaid over decades of sisterhood. Sophia's reflection in the vanity mirror showed fear masquerading as bridal excitement, her hands shaking as she applied lipstick with the precision of someone desperately maintaining control. "James knows about the inheritance," came out gentler than expected. watching as her carefully constructed composure cracked like expensive foundation under pressure. He knows about the debt, the requirements, everything, and he's willing to go through with the ceremony anyway because he loves you, but not like this, Sophia, not built on lies. Her response revealed the depths of her desperation and the twisted logic that had brought us to this moment. "You don't understand what it's like to have nothing," she whispered, mascara threatening to betray emotions she'd kept buried for months. "You've always been the strong one, the responsible one. Everyone expects me to fail, so when I finally found a way to succeed, I took it." The choice before her was simple but terrifying. Walk down that aisle in an hour and marry James honestly, admitting everything to the gathered family and friends, or watch her last chance at financial salvation disappear forever. Either way, the performance was over. The ceremony proceeded with picture-perfect precision until the moment James and Sophia faced each other at the altar. What should have been a private exchange of vows became something far more profound when Sophia's voice cracked on the word honesty. The packed church fell silent as she stopped mid-sentence, her carefully rehearsed words dissolving into something raw and unplanned. "Before we go any further," she said, turning to address the congregation instead of her groom, "there's something everyone needs to know." The officiant stepped back, recognizing that whatever was about to happen had moved beyond his script. Mom's face went white in the front row, understanding that months of careful planning were about to unravel in the most public way possible. What poured out wasn't the polished confession we'd discussed in the bridal suite, but a desperate, honest accounting of everything that had led to this moment. The inheritance requirements, the mounting debt, the lies about James's career, the manipulation attempts with David, all of it spilled into the sacred space with the force of a dam finally breaking. James stood perfectly still throughout her confession, his face cycling through emotions but never landing on the anger or humiliation everyone expected. When Sophia finished speaking, her wedding dress wrinkled from gripping the fabric in anxiety, he took her hands with a tenderness that surprised even those who knew him best. "I know," he said simply, his voice carrying to the back of the church, "and I love you anyway. But we can't build a marriage on desperation and secrets. So we're going to postpone this wedding until we can do it right, when you're marrying me, not what you think I can provide." The collective exhale from 200 guests created a sound like wind through trees, relief and disappointment mixing in equal measure. 3 months later, the inheritance paperwork sat on my kitchen table beside coffee that had grown cold while David and I discussed what to do with money that felt both earned and unearned. Grandma's conditions had been met through my relationship with David and years of careful saving, but claiming it felt hollow when the family had nearly destroyed itself over these same funds. The solution came during one of our new family dinners, smaller gatherings where honest conversation had replaced the careful navigation of previous years. Mom was attending financial counseling twice a week and had found part-time work at a nonprofit credit counseling service, using her painful experience to help other families recognize the warning signs of financial manipulation. Her house was no longer at risk, thanks to a portion of the inheritance used to satisfy the predatory refinancing debt. Sophia had filed for bankruptcy with dignity, working with a legitimate attorney David recommended rather than trying to find loopholes in laws designed to protect people like her. James had been there through every humiliating disclosure and court appearance, proving his love was real even when her desperation had made it impossible to see. They were planning a small ceremony in 6 months, a real celebration this time, funded by their combined modest savings and genuine joy. The inheritance money that remained became the foundation for something Grandma would have loved, a family financial literacy program that helped women recognize and escape cycles of debt and manipulation. Working alongside Mom at the Credit Counseling Center, using our story as a cautionary tale while teaching practical skills, felt like the kind of legacy our grandmother had intended when she created those careful conditions. David and I married on a Tuesday evening in my parents' backyard, with Sophia as my maid of honor and James handling the photography. The ceremony cost less than Sophia's original wedding dress, but the happiness was authentic in ways that money couldn't manufacture. During our vows, David promised to support my dreams without rescuing me from my responsibilities, while mine included a commitment to building wealth together rather than hiding financial truth behind family loyalty. The trust fund requirements that nearly destroyed our family had actually been designed to strengthen it. Grandma's way of ensuring her granddaughters understood that real security comes from honest partnership and genuine financial literacy, not manipulation or magical thinking. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't money at all, but the hard-earned wisdom that teaches you how to build a life worth living.